Eve. We're in chapter 22 tonight, 1 Samuel chapter 22. Do want to remind you guys that coming up we have, so Christmas Eve is a Sunday, right? So Christmas Eve we're going to have a single service in the morning, which will be our regular Sunday morning service, and we'll probably have a Christmas theme. Haven't decided yet, but we'll have a Christmas or a Sunday morning service. And depending on where I am in the resurrection after this Sunday's service, in the time of the resurrection and the ascension and everything, I might just go ahead and just kind of bookmark the beginning and the end of Jesus' ministry for that Sunday morning. But then Sunday evening is going to be a special service. It'll be a Christmas Eve service. And that'll be a sweet, neat time. And so we encourage you guys to come out for that, invite friends and everything. It's going to be kind of a spectacular. A lot of things going on. So it should be a great time. We're also going to celebrate in communion that evening as well. And then the next week, we're actually, New Year's Eve is actually on a Sunday as well. So we're going to do the same thing on that Sunday as well. But that night, we're going to kind of have a fellowship get-together, pot faith, and prayer time, and all here at the church as well. So we're going to do one Sunday morning service on that day, and then encourage you guys to come out that evening. Now, some brave souls might hang out until 12 o'clock. I'm not. Or you'll find me on my wife loves to do stuff like that. You know, you'll find me on my couch. Or in my office maybe, but that's as far as I'll make it. So anyways. All right, so we are in the book of 1 Samuel. And 1 Samuel's not all about Samuel. 1 Samuel is all about David. And David's life. And so much of David's life he spent on the run. He spent a couple decades on the run, away from people that were trying to kill him, that should not have been trying to kill him, his own son and his own king, his leader. And why was he going through all this? Well, because God was forming him. And God forms us through trials, period, doesn't he? That's what he does. And, we like to think that we grow when things are easy, but when things are easy, we tend to put our feet up and chillax, right? We take a breather. And the Lord knows this, and we know this. In those times of trial, or those times when we're growing in the Lord, and the Lord wanted to make something great out of David. And so David spent a lot of time on the run as he was formulating in him a character that would make him a man after God's own heart. And so the situation we run into in 1 Samuel chapter 23 is that God had told Saul that he would no longer be king. And so after God had told him that early on, Samuel snuck off and he anointed someone else to be the next king, not in Saul's family. Okay, completely different tribe. And this was a young man, David, the person that no one expected to be the next king, and he was anointed to be king. But he wouldn't be king right away. He would be trained to be a king. Now, a king in Israel was supposed to be more like a shepherd. And David was a shepherd boy. And he was supposed to be someone that listened to God, more like a pastor than a king. And where David messes up is when he tries to be more like a king than a pastor and a shepherd. When he's doing well is when he's acting like a pastor and a shepherd over the people as opposed to a king. Okay? But so in being that he wasn't going to have this harsh overthrow of Saul, he was serving Saul. He married into his family. He was an employee. He was a hired musician to help Saul when Saul was going through turmoil with these spirits that would bother him. And so he would placate him. But he was also a general in his army and served him faithfully. And Saul was extremely jealous of David and tried to kill him a couple of times. And then eventually, David, it was seen that he was going to try to kill David. And he's been chasing David all over the place, or he's starting to chase David all over the place. And this is what we're going to look at in these two chapters. So David is a man on the run. He's a man that is afraid for his life because the king is trying to kill him. Now, first he fled to Ahimelech in the city of Nob, and then he lies to him why he is there. We're going to see the results of that in today's message. And then he goes to the Philistine city of Gath, the city where Goliath is from. Now that's nuts. I don't know why he did that, but he did that. That was a bad idea. And then he acts nuts in front of the guy in order to escape. And so he acts like a madman to escape from them. And then it says in chapter 22, verse 1, it says, David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And so if you think about Israel, if you have this rectangle of a nation, you have north of Jerusalem, you have this area where all the leadership is and where Samuel's living and all this stuff's happening. And then he goes down to the Philistine area towards the coastline and south of there, okay? And so then he escapes to this cave of Adullam in that area, but far enough away to be safe. And when his brothers and his father's house heard about it, they went down to him, okay? So these men had been serving in Saul's army, and now they're going to desert the army, and they're going to join up with their little brother. Why would they do that? Well, in those days, remember they wanted a king like all the other countries, and in those days, kings, if they were fearful, they would kill the next king's family if they could, so that no one could take over his kingdom. And so now all of a sudden they're kind of forced to pull themselves away from Saul and go join with David. Now when David was hiding, he actually wrote some psalms. We know he wrote some psalms as a young man as he was taking care of the sheep, but he also wrote a lot of psalms when he was on the run and when people made him mad. So there's a psalm in Psalm 142, and it says, a contemplation of David, a prayer in the cave. And it says, I cried out to the Lord with my voice to the Lord I made my supplication. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare before him my trouble. And so what he's saying is while he's on the run, he's doing what we all pretty much do when we're in trouble, right? We draw near to the Lord. And so you're going to see this continually throughout this particular passage, that he's writing psalms about the events in this passage. Verse 2, and everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him. So he became captain over them, and there were about 400 men with him. What is this verse saying? All the losers escaped from society and joined with David. And when we were meeting in our house, the first year that we were here, we had this guy show up, and he just had this great personality and all. I talk to him every so often from around the country, wherever he's living, but he sat down and he goes, man, I was doing my devotions this morning, Pastor, and our church was probably 10 or 15 people at that time, you know, and Roy and Sherry were there. I think, Rodney, you guys had connected with us. I don't think you were coming consistently at that time, but this it was Rob. And Rob lays down with me on the carpet, and he looks at me and he goes, I was reading this verse today. Everyone who is discontented, and everyone who is in debt, and everyone who is in distress. And he just had this big old smile on his face. He goes, that's our church, Pastor. Isn't that cool? But they didn't start off as mighty. They started off in trouble. And the thing is, when God wants to do a great work, he doesn't choose the most likely person to do the great work. He doesn't go through the yearbook and choose the most likely to succeed. When he wants to do a big work, he chooses the least likely to succeed in many ways, and very often he does that. You know, you consider Moses all kinds of excuses not to be used by God. You know, he started off, you know, as being adopted out and floated in a river and, you know, all this other stuff. And so it looks good, but God doesn't use him while he has all this self inside of him. He spends 40 years in the desert before God uses him. He's got to empty himself of himself, and then God wants to use him, and then he's saying, wait, I got a stuttering problem, you know? And he's offering up excuses. What about Gideon? You know, we always think of Gideon. Man, that's a great Bible story, isn't it? Gideon was a chicken, right? He was in a cave trying to thresh wheat where there's no wind. And all you're doing is throwing it up and down and nothing's happening. Why? He was afraid. And then he goes, I'm going to test God. Are you sure, God? No, I'm going to test you again. Are you sure? Okay, 2 answers, 3 answers. Like 5 times he tests God, and God has to give him visions and all kinds of other things. So then 32,000 people show up, and he's like going, well, this is cool. There's still 130,000, and we're 32,000. It's still really cool, though, that 32,000, and the Lord said there's way too much. So he has to cut his army down to 300. Just so Gideon doesn't think that it was his own power that did it, right? But he tested God so many times. When people say, I'm going to throw out a fleece, we say that, we use that term. I've used that term before too, but what you're saying is, I'm not trusting God yet, And he did it again and again. Peter and John, what were they? Fishermen, right? And they're before the Sanhedrin. It says in Acts 4:13, now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John, they perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men, and they marveled, and they realized that they had been with Jesus. These men were bold, and what these men were saying, they couldn't refute, right? And I just love it, because we often ask, could God use us? Of course he can. But I'm not a pastor, but I'm not this, but I'm not that. You know what? Whoever you minister to, and maybe you encourage them to walk back with God, or maybe you're encouraging them to seek to know God, and God uses you in that way. You are forever that person in that person's life, right? And you need to understand something. Billy Graham is not at the refinery. Billy Graham is not at the truck yard. Billy Graham is not in the classroom. You are. You're in the hospital room as a nurse or a patient, or you're in the business office. You're there. And God wants to use you. And so often we say, well, let's let the professionals do it. No, never say that. You say, here I am, God, use me. And with that attitude, he certainly will. Because God uses the weak to shame the strong, those things which are not, those things that are despised, instead of those things that are lovely. What? He wants to use you so that no man would glory in his presence. That's why you had a zealot, a terrorist. That's why you had a tax collector, an IRS guy. And that's why you had a bunch of fishermen, right? And these were the disciples that turned the world upside down. Now, he did throw a smart guy in there eventually, Paul, but he was the last one, specially chosen, separate, right? But the thing about Paul, guys, he didn't get to go to his special people, did he? He was rejected where he was the biggest expert. You ever think about that? Because Paul should have said, I am the apologist to the Jews. Send me to the Jews. And who did God send him to? Bunch of pagans. He wants to argue theology, and he's trying to get people to not sleep with their stepmother. If you think about it, right? But Paul's, I'm going to embrace whatever God calls me to do. And so God took Paul totally out of his element, because he was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was a Jew of Jews. He had pedigree. And what did God send him to? The dogs, And he embraced it. He embraced it. And so God takes us out of that comfort zone. I thought, hey, I'm moving, from California. I'm moving out to Texas. But it's a beach city, right? How many people in our church surf? I mean, we had the surfer boys in the band today, but that was about it, right? Now, I'd do much better if I fished and hunt, but I don't fish or hunt, And he, in a sense, he took me out of my comfort zone and said, it isn't about how cool you are in your area. It is about the message. It is about the love, right? And so God wants to use whoever, okay? And so God sends all these men who would eventually be called what? Mighty men. They're going to be called mighty men. How cool is that? Verse 3, then David went up from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, please let my father and mother come here with you till I know what God will do for me. So now he takes his family to the pagan Moabites. Why did he take them there? Well, first of all, they were enemies of Saul. An enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? They're going to protect them from Saul. But understand that David was a great-grandchild, and his father was the grandchild of a Moabite woman. You remember her name? Her name's Ruth, right? And that was her grandmother, and she was from Moab. And so here, though, we see David taking responsibility for the fact that he's being chased and his family's in danger. And so he wants to help his family. He's taking care of his parents. He's taking care of his family. Now, this is interesting. I asked my nephew, who was raised in Southern California schools, if you have a child, who's responsible to educate your child? You know what he said? The government. And I go, really? So it's the government. Okay, so if your child doesn't have enough money to go to college, who's supposed to get your child money to go to college? He said the government. If your child gets sick, who's supposed to take care of your child? And he said the government. Guys, who's supposed to take care of each other? The family, right? So it's first of all family, second of all community, which includes churches and synagogues and community organizations. And then down the line, it's fine if there's a safety net that's not abused, that the government has it, and that's fine. But we've lost that. And so you need to understand it's our responsibility to take care of each other, isn't it? Well, how can we do that? Well, listen, what if those that had more money in our church weren't sending 40 to 50% of that money into government organizations? You think they would much rather give it to those that they love and know? And would it be more efficient? So if you're taking care of someone and you're giving them money for food and they buy booze with it, you're going to bust them down, aren't you? But when a check comes from Washington and it goes into someone's hand and they buy booze with it, what does Washington do? Give them more. Nothing, right? Yeah. Tax us more and give away more of our money, right? You know, but what I'm saying is when you see this, what happens is the government the family should. And the government takes that away because the government is battling with the family for what? The admiration or the love or the need from the people, right? And so at a lower level, if it was families ministering to families, guys, it'd be much more functional. You know, when families do that, they're pretty efficient with their money, aren't they? Do you guys know that 70% of the money you send into taxes goes to nothing? Only 30% goes towards what it's supposed to go for. And that's government-wide. When a family does that, it's 100%. My sister was struggling with prescription drug addiction, and my brother said, I have $8,000 to send you to a treatment center, and I'm going to pay it. You know how much of that $8,000 would have went to the treatment center? $8,000. Now, when a church or a community organization does that, guys, it goes to what? 85 to 90%. So what does that mean? Well, there's some work and that it takes, you know, to take care of our missionaries and stuff like that. You know, and actually we don't take any out. But if we had a ton of missionaries, we'd have to take some because we'd have to have a staff to pay them to take care of their finances, right? So 85 to 95% efficient. Community, churches, and stuff like that. It's not 100% because you have some outside group that still needs to be paid, right? But when governments do it, only 30% gets where it's supposed to go. Isn't this backwards? Right? So guys, understand, as much as you can, take care of your family. When my mother-in-law had 2 strokes, got cancer, and was going blind, we took her into our house. Was it easy? Absolutely not. But you know what? She got saved before she died. It was a struggle, and my wife and her mother had not had a good relationship their whole life. The mother was extremely selfish and just kept on abandoning my wife again and again and again. And it was very hurtful. But I tell you what, they got to mend a lot of that. And my wife got to show a lot of love. And then one of my daughters actually got to lead her grandma to Christ before she died. You know, family. My grandma died in our house in California. 6 kids, mom and dad, and grandma lived in a house. And my grandma died there in the house of cancer. 94 years old. It wasn't like, oh, shock. But it's family. It's family. And a lot of times people will call, hey, will you pay my electric bill? And I go, well, why don't you call your church? I don't go to church. I don't believe in God. Okay, here's the deal. Why don't you call your family? Oh, I hate my family. And then I say, well, it's probably about time that you made up with your family. And, well, I know what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to pay my electric bill. Click. But here's the thing. We're family, right? And I'm not trying to be a jerk, and we help people financially in our church. Now, there's going to be a line. No, just kidding. but we're able to help people, not over a long period of time or depending on what God tells the church to do, because the church still has to function. But we do have a budget to help people get over, when they get setbacks, because they have family. And then if they don't have family, then we can be a part of that second line of helping. And many times not the whole thing. I mean, one time God told us to defend a woman who got in trouble with the law. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this could be like $25,000. We can't do that. And we got together with the elders and we prayed. I even called Pastor Chuck out in California, and Pastor Chuck, kind of confirmed, yeah, you should help this woman. And so we were praying, and so we dove in, and it was well over $1 million we ended up raising for this woman. Now, don't get any ideas. We're not going to buy a house on Ocean Drive. But then that becomes family. You see how that works, and it's a good thing. In 1 Timothy, Paul wrote Timothy, and he said, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. And we're not talking about someone getting sick and getting into a hard situation even though they're working hard. We're talking about the person that's just being lazy and just saying, whatever. Someone else will take care of you. But guys, more and more we're seeing that. We see men, sleep with women, have children, and just walk off again and again and again. And it's not good for culture, and it's certainly not what God teaches us to do. He teaches us to take care of each other, take care of family. And so this is what David does. Verse 4, so he brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Now the prophet Gad said to David, do not stay in the stronghold, depart and go to the land of Judah. So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. Okay, so the stronghold that he now runs to is most likely the area of Masada. Later on, King Herod would build on this high plateau. So it's weird. You go to Masada, and it's 1,200 feet high, and it's this high plateau. It's like a tabletop mountain, and it's steep on all the sides, and it just sticks up. You know what the elevation is at the top of that mountain? 0. It's sea level. But you're coming up from 1,200 or 1,300 feet below sea level at the Dead Sea, okay? And you go up to this place, and it's very hard to attack, okay? And so most likely this is the place where he would have been. Bethlehem is right across from this. And so if he would have went over the hills and into the valley, the Jordan River Valley, he would run into the Dead Sea. And he would have went to a place called En-Gedi, which he eventually goes to. And he would have played around as a boy at Masada, or maybe took the sheep there or whatever. And there'd be small trails, but they were easily defendable. And they would boil hot oil and pour it on the people trying to attack them if they were defending themselves. That's how they would do it. I mean, it's just an incredible place. And so, over the years, it has some history, okay? So he went from Nob, where he was with the priest. He went to Gath of the Philistines. He went to Adullam. Then he went to Moab. Then he went to Masada. And then he went back to this place called Hereth, which is a forest. So he's just bouncing around. He's on the run. Like, he's seriously on the run. It's not like he's able to build a little pueblo out there and hang out, I'm safe, I'm good. He's just continually running. Verse 6, when Saul heard that David and the men who were with him had been discovered. Now Saul was staying in Gibeah under a tamarisk tree in Ramah with his spear in his hand and all his servants standing around him. So he is camped out because there's most likely battles going on. Saul said to his servants who stood about him, "Hear now, you Benjamites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, all you who have conspired against me? And there is no one who reveals to me that my son has made a covenant with the son of Jesse? And there's not one of you who is sorry for me, who reveals to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as it is to this day?" So he's talking to his own people. He's a Benjamite. And he's talking to the tribe of Benjamin. And he's looking at them and he's accusing them of conspiring with David. He's going absolutely nuts. And I want you to know, it's all about him. You guys didn't do this for me. It's my son and this, and he's conspiring. It's me. It's all me, me, me. He is not a king for the people. He's a king for himself. And I use this term a lot, but I want you guys to know this from me, and I also want you to know, and since Corpus is a very transient place, in a sense, people aren't always here for a super long time. But if you go and you find a church, doesn't matter how big it is, doesn't matter how fancy it is, doesn't matter how entertaining it is, make sure the church's goal is that you grow. And when you go there, make sure your goal is to serve other people, right? Because a lot of times, and there's a huge difference, and it's not always easily recognizable, but there's some churches where the people that come are a means to an end. More people come, we can get more money, we can build more buildings, I can sign a book deal. You see it? See what I'm saying? It's more, I want more people so that I can be more glorified. But how should a church be? Listen, your goal when you come to church shouldn't be to be filled. You should desire to come and be spent. You should desire to come and empty yourself, as it were. And if you come with that attitude, you're going to be filled when you leave. You know? Because you're coming with a servant's heart. But the leadership's attitude should be, you're not here to serve me. I want to see you grow. See, hopefully, and this is my heart in this church, and hopefully it comes off this way, or hopefully it actually is this way, is that you are my end. My main ministry as a pastor and as a teacher is that you grow. You are the product of my ministry. So if you're growing, I'm blessed. I'm not talking growing in numbers. I'm talking about growing spiritually. If you are growing spiritually, I'm blessed because that is my ministry. You know, and so here's the thing. You come with an attitude of servanthood towards each other and towards me, and then I come with an attitude of servanthood, and the leadership comes with an attitude of servanthood towards you. You can't beat that combination. Right? A bunch of sold out people trying to outserve one another, out-love one another, out-bless one another. And that's going to be a healthy place. But listen, you guys are not a means to an end. You know, for me, you guys are not the means to a salary or a good life or a retirement. You're not a means to an end. I mean, I you know, when the economy got weird, I'm thinking, how can I still pastor the church and provide for my family if I have to stop taking a salary? That was my question. And I was trying to figure out ways. I almost ran for justice of the peace so I can get health insurance and a salary so I could keep on, you know, ministering to the church, right? And so there's different, you know, things because my heart is to minister. All that stuff is nice. I'm blessed. The church takes care of me. But if I didn't have that stuff, I'm still willing to do that because for the first 5.5 years of this church, that's what I did. I worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs so that I was allowed to minister to you. See, and watch out for that because in America, being a pastor can be a good living. It can be a good business choice. And that's not the kind of pastors that you want in your life. And it doesn't matter how big the church is. My pastor is a servant. And I think being in the ministry has really hurt my pastor's health, David Rosales. And because he just cares so much about his people. And the church is huge. There's like 7,000 people that attend every Sunday morning, and it's crazy. But at the same time, man, he just loves his people. He pours into his people, and I'm one guy, and I got to talk to him for 2.5 hours after service when I was out there. Just, hey, can I talk to you, Pastor David? I've been gone for 20 years. I haven't been in his church for, a member of his church for 20 years. He's like, yeah, I'll spend time with you. Him and his wife spent time with me. It's like, that's so cool. Oh, let's see, no, he's like, no, just loves people, and remember, the king of Israel was supposed to be different, not like all the other kings. What is Saul doing? The people are means to my end. Instead of saying, I want to protect my people, and I care about you, and I want to lead you in the right way. It's a huge difference, right? Philippians 2, 3, and 4, let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others as better than himself. Each of you look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. And then it talks about the heart and the mind of Christ there in Philippians 2. That's the heart we want, that it's like Christ. Guys, Jesus, when he came to earth, wasn't the king of a small nation in the Middle East. He's king of the universe, creator and sustainer of all things. And what did he do? He came to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. That's what Jesus did. He had every right just to crush everybody around him and say, bow, knave, or whatever, but he didn't. He gave his life a ransom for many. He came humbly as a servant. But he's sitting here and he's accusing these people of conspiring against him. And no one feels sorry for me. Oh gosh, give me a break. We're going to see how bad it gets. I don't know if we're going to get to the next chapter. Probably not. Verse 9, then answered Doeg, the Edomite. Now, we had a guy on staff named Doug, who was a good friend of mine. So I'd always say Doug, the Edomite. But he was from Edom. He was set over the servants of Saul and said, I saw the son of Jesse going to Nob, to Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions and gave him the sword of Goliath, the Philistine. Now, Doeg the Edomite, we saw before. Remember when David went, he ran to the city of Nob and he went up to Ahimelech? And Ahimelech goes, why are you here? This is kind of weird. And he says, I'm on a mission from Saul. He lied. Instead of saying, I'm on the run. I don't know why Saul is trying to kill me, but, And so at this point, if he had the whole truth, Ahimelech would have been able to deal with the situation much better, right? But since David lied, David probably thought that lie was nothing. But now, this is months later, and now that lie is affecting the guy that he lied to, right? So he's telling on him. This Edomite who's serving Saul is telling on Ahimelech. And Ahimelech was acting in good faith, thinking that David was serving Saul at the time, right? And so there's consequences of David's lie. Now, David wrote some psalms that are called imprecatory psalms, which means God fill their mouth with gravel and grind their teeth to dust. He would ask for that, right? These are the types of people and events that David wrote his imprecatory psalms about. And what he's doing is he's praying honestly what he feels. Is that a good way to pray? No, not necessarily. But what is happening is the Bible is truly recording David's anger even though he had a part of it, this guy is misrepresenting Ahimelech also. Because Ahimelech isn't saying David lied to Ahimelech, or Doeg isn't saying David lied to Ahimelech. He's saying Ahimelech just helped him without any question, right? So he's lying also. But Psalm 52, David's commentary, is about this guy, and it's not a pretty one. Verse 11, so the king sent to call Ahimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests who were in Nob, and they all came to the king. Now, they're not thinking anything's wrong. If the truth had been told, he would have been able to prepare for this or actually run and go hang out with David, right? But that's not what's happening. They're coming like lambs to the slaughter. And Saul said, hear now, son of Ahitub. He answered, here I am, Lord, verse 13. Then Saul said to him, why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, that he should rise against me to lie in wait as it is this day? So Ahimelech answered the king and said, and who among all your servants is as faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, and who goes at your bidding and is honorable in all your house? This guy's an honorable guy. This is the kind of guy you want with you, right? But David lied. Doeg lied. Saul is accusing. But Ahimelech knows how loyal David is, and so does everybody else. Verse 15. Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. Let not the king impute anything to his servant or to any in the house of my father, for your servant knew nothing of all this, little or much. Again, Ahimelech did not have the choice of deciding for himself to risk his relationship with Saul or not help David at all. He would have had a choice had the truth been given to him. I imagine that Ahimelech would have helped David, and David would have had someone helping him over the long term. But David thought, what Ahimelech doesn't know can't hurt him. But we always think little lies, no big deal. But they do hurt. And so David didn't give Ahimelech the chance to make up his own mind. David was manipulative. It was manipulation, just straight up. And it had consequences. Verse 16, and the king said, you shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house. Then the king said to the guards who stood about him, turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because his hand is also with David, and because they knew when he fled and did not tell it to me. But the servants of the king would not lift their hands to strike the priests of the Lord. They were not going to kill the priests. Why? They were Jews. And they knew David. David was an employee of the king like they were. And he was a faithful servant, and they respected David, and they respected Ahimelech. And they were not going to kill him. Warren Wiersbe says of this, he says, Saul struggled to kill the Amalekites, the enemies of the people of God. But he doesn't seem to have a problem ordering the death of God's priests. Oh my gosh, we as a church need to be so careful, because we can attack each other in the body of Christ, but embrace the things of the world. We need to be very, very careful, because we look at Saul, we think that's horrible, but we think, how many times have we ripped into someone or gossiped about someone or put a knife in their back by saying horrible things about another Christian? And guys, there's some weird theology out there. And I just don't want to be that guy, though, that is attacking people that might have different theology than me and weird theology, and I'm not going to ever really join with them because it's not good stuff, but I don't want to be up here publicly thrashing someone that I'm going to see face to face in heaven, and all their theology will be correct then. But it's like we find more enemies in the house of God than we do in the world. It should not be so. It should not be so. Verse 18, and the king said to Doeg, You turn and kill the priests." So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck the priests and killed on that day 85 men who wore a linen ephod, or a priestly garment. This guy isn't Jewish. The Edomites hate the Jews. And he's like, oh yeah, I get to do this now. Also Nob, remember the city where David fled? The city of the priests, he struck with the edge of the sword both men and women, children and nursing infants, oxen and donkeys and sheep with the edge of the sword. So the 85 priests that lived there, their whole families were also slaughtered, as well as their livestock. And it seems that Saul is trying to strike fear into the nation to not conspire against him. Oh. It's so much better. It's so much better to win people with character rather than with force. Isn't it? I remember being a school teacher many years ago now in Flower Bluff at the high school there, and I've taught various other places. And so I was an English teacher in the zero tolerance school, where all the kids were on sentence, right? I don't know if you guys were ever one of those kids, but they were my kids, you know. I didn't have any of the regular population at Flower Bluff High School. I just had the kids that had gotten in trouble, right? And some of those kids were always in trouble, you know. But I had just moved from California, and I had hundreds of kids in my youth group. And I loved being around the kids. And so if you gave me 5 to 10 kids, it's like, I don't care how bad you are. She's, I have a police officer outside ready to arrest you if you mess up. They behave pretty well, right? And the kids could tell that I actually liked being with them. And I didn't think that they were the worst thing on earth like many of their other teachers. Because quite frankly, I was subbing at Flower Bluff High School before they hired me as a teacher. And I saw many teachers at the high school who hated kids. And it was always a threat. Even when I sent a kid to the office, I said, okay, you're going now. But, I go, I'm not going to yell. I don't hate you. But I said this would happen, so you got to go. And I wouldn't yell at him. You know, and I think for about at least 10, maybe 15 years, I'd have kids that would visit the church over time or call me up, hey, Mr. Carver, what's going on? You know, and some of them got saved. I've done a few weddings for the kids that I had in class. You know, and some marriage counseling and some other things over the years, you know. And I just found it like, once you just start threatening people, you're done. You know, school teachers in here, hey, you know, it's like, yeah. You know, but if they know you love them and care for them, you got them. And if you raise your voice a little bit, it is like yelling. But they're like, whoa, you know. And so this is how Saul is leading. He's leading like we see the Romans leading over their nation in the time of Jesus, where we are on Sunday mornings, where they would just crucify 1,000 people just to warn people, don't mess with us. But then you're always looking over your shoulder, aren't you? So Saul was probably looking over his shoulder all the time now. You think David ever had to look over his own shoulder with his own men? Mm-mm. Now, one of the sons of Ahimelech, verse 20, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the Lord's priest. So David said to Abiathar, I knew that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I have caused the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not fear, for he who seeks my life seeks your life. But with me you shall be safe. And so he recognizes that he had a hand in causing the death of the priest. He's not taking full, obviously, responsibility. That's on Saul's shoulders. But he realizes, so he's learned a huge lesson there. Then they told David, saying, look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they are robbing the threshing floors. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and stop. We're not going to get into that. We'll go into that next time. I do just at this point want to challenge you guys. To take your anger and your judgment and just put it in check. And some of you are thinking, oh, I don't have that, you know. Man, I have these lovely Christian daughters. And they can still drive me nuts, you know. And just frustrate me to death. And I know they're coming home tomorrow night for a month from college, right? And they're in college, man. We're spending our retirement that we're not putting into retirement on them right now, you know. So they can get through school and go on all the mission trips they want to go on, which they go on a lot of them. But you know what? Kenny DeConing was sharing on our Friday night Christmas event we had last Friday night. He was just saying, when it says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. So we need to ask ourselves, how does Christ love us? Right? Does Christ often slap you across the head, browbeat you, turn his back on you, and not talk to you and take away all your stuff? Or does he woo you and love you back into fellowship once you turn your back on him? Does he ever turn his back on you? Never. Never does. And so we're to love one another with the heart of Christ. And I think that we need to take that I, me anger and the ugliness. You see how ugly it was in Saul? You guys are all after me. You guys aren't doing this. You guys, you know? And start thinking differently. And I tell you what, here's something that I often do. And I've learned over the years to do this. Because as much as I try never to think that way, I still do. Someone offends me, I get offended. But as quick as I can, I got to recognize, if you're ever offended, just start thinking this. Why am I offended? Well, because they did this, this, and this. Okay? Now you've gotten that out of the way. Why did they do that? So that's the next question. Why did they do that? Well, something's going on in their life. I've learned over the years, sometimes people attack me, and I kind of go, why in the world are you attacking me? And then I think back to our conversations, and I think, man, you had a horrible relationship with your dad, and you've never actually worked all the way through that, and you're taking it out on me because I represent authority in your life. And you're angry with me, and that's a bummer. How can we help you out of this? Right? Because as soon as you're offended, you're allowing that person's problem to now be yours. And now you're just as angry as they are. And anger is temporary insanity, right? And now you're going to do just as stupid as things as they've done to you. You're going to do it right back to them. And doesn't the Lord tell us not to do that? Do not return anger for anger. The wrath of man does not bring about the righteousness of God. Give room for the Lord to properly discipline people instead of always, you know. And I know, like so if my wife offends me, I'll get offended, and then all of a sudden I turn around and I'm at her. What am I doing? Am I being a man? I'm supposed to be her strength. I'm supposed to be the priest in the home. And what am I doing? I'm ripping into my beauty. That's stupid. But if I can put that in check and just not respond, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, work through my little sinful self and get to the point of saying, okay, that hurt me, But why did she do that? And how can I help her get over that? And whether it's a coworker, or whether it's a child or a parent in your life, to be able to sit back and go, that hurt, but why did they feel they needed to do that? And how can I help them not need to do that? Isn't it a better place? I hate allowing people to ruin my day. But if I'm just this open nerve, it's all about me and I'm selfish, every day is ruined for me. Literally every day is ruined. Because if you don't see me on the freeway and you cut me off, I am mad at you and you've ruined my day because you've offended me. And I don't know that, some dog is at your feet or something, or you just didn't see me. Or even if you did it on purpose because you're aggressive. But can't I be thinking, you're aggressive, man, it's Christmas time. You're probably having a bad day, and if you're not saved, you don't even know what this season's about. And you don't have the joy of the Lord, man. That's a bummer. Man, I wish I could pull you over and take you out to lunch and talk to you, whatever. It's like all of a sudden your heart changes, doesn't it? I remember I was out surfing, and I was having a pretty good day of surfing at my home break. And I get a lot of waves there. I still get a lot of waves there when I visit California because I know the break. And I don't cut anybody off. I don't do anything bad. I'm not aggressive in the water. I just catch a lot of waves there because I know the spot. And it was a really crowded day. And this guy he paddles up to me and he just goes boom, and he punches me in the jaw. Now you're thinking, ooh, that's heavy. No, if you're on a surfboard trying to punch somebody, it's like a slap fight in elementary school or something. It's nothing because there's no leverage. It's like the board moves and the body, nothing's going to happen. But I was a Christian at that point. And I was a lifeguard. I used to train lifeguards and surfer, water polo player, swimmer from the time, on swim teams from the time I was 6. I can take care of myself in the water. At one time, I could hold my breath for 3.5 minutes, right? I'm like, I could drown you. Get on the land, I'm going to run from you. But in the water, I can take care of myself, And this guy did that. And I remember thinking in my heart, like I looked at him, I go, dude, are you okay? And I looked at him, and I'm asking the question, like, don't punch me again. So I kind of backed up, but I'm going, are you okay? And I remember thinking, that is so weird for me to ask that. Because I was really asking him, are you a whack job? No, I wasn't asking. I was asking him, like, what is wrong? Like, surfing is supposed to be fun. And you took a swing at me, and I haven't even been around you. And I go, and I looked at him, I go, and I said this, I remember he started paddling away. And I paddled next to him, and I go, I'm really asking you, are you okay? And I don't know, he grumbled or whatever, and he paddled off. And then my good friends out in the water, he was out of the water in 5 minutes because they're all cussing him out. And I'm like, don't do that. They weren't Christians, But they're like, you don't do this to our guys that live here, that surf here all the time. And, but guys, what if we cop that attitude? Or if we could catch ourselves? And again, after walking with the Lord for 29 years, almost 30 years, come May, I still initially am offended. But I've just learned the difference is for me now, and the earlier you can do it, the better days you can have when people are mad at you or attacking you. To be able to say, why are they doing this? Instead of taking it personally. Right? What is going on in their life? And you do not have to be the same person they are at the moment. And if you're not that person, you can actually help. But if you are the offended person, are you going to help the other person? And Jesus said what? Do not just look out for your own needs. Look out for the needs of others, right? And man, if I attack somebody and they didn't attack me back and they looked at me and they go, well, how can I help you? Can I pray for you right now? That would be sweet, right? That would be good. And so the quicker that time is from the offense to the change in your attitude, the better off you are. And the less your day's ruined. And you can walk with God. But just a challenge to think about during this week. And CT, why don't you get ready to close in worship. Guys, and I'm going to let you guys know this. You're the smaller group than the Sunday group. But so we're going to have a single service. And so we can fit 300 chairs in the sanctuary. And we have about 225 in here. We've been having between 200 and 250 people in church on Sundays, but, for about a year now, right? So we can actually condense into one service. So we're actually praying we're going to have 2 Sunday morning single services for Christmas and New Year's. And if that looks like it's going to work, we're actually going to probably continue for a while. With our luck, we'll go up to 500 people right away and have to go back to 2 services. But what we want to do is possibly have the church all together in one place, which is a wonderful thing. And then what happens is we have more servants instead of spreading them out over 2 services. But what we're then going to have happen is we're going to have people less tired, but we're also going to have servants that serve during that service in children's ministry probably want to come out to Wednesday nights. And as much as you're amazed that people are here on Wednesday nights, guys, for me, when I was just rededicating my heart to the Lord, Wednesday nights were important for me. It was such a blessing to be in church on Wednesday night and to be encouraged and challenged and grow. And so we've been talking about how to change Wednesday nights. We're not going to change the format of Wednesday nights for a while, although I'm going to feel more free to say, hey, let's break up into prayer groups for the last half of service or whatever. We'll do that on Wednesday nights, and I think we've always had that freedom. But the cool thing about Wednesday nights, and the hardest thing I've had when I'm thinking through these changes, is the fact that Wednesday nights we're going through the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is just awesome, And if you know the Old Testament, the New Testament just takes on so much extra color. Yes, if you only know the New Testament, you can be saved, okay? Absolutely, and you can grow. But if you know the Old Testament and you take that information into the New Testament, I think the amount of knowledge that you have about God, it doubles. And I think it's easier to fall more in love with God when you get the whole picture. The more full picture. Guys, we'll never get the whole picture of God, right? We're just barely scratching the surface. But man, to leave out, the Old Testament on a regular basis, and that's why for me it's like, I don't want to have a big Wednesday night service just to have a big Wednesday night service. I want to have a big Wednesday night service because the Old Testament is so awesome. Right? And to go through it and to have the sweetness of that fellowship, and then our family times once a month, which we're having next week, and everything is just so sweet. So I just want to encourage you guys with that, just to be praying. Again, no secrets in the church here. We're pretty open with what goes on and everything, but just be praying about that and see. Because, if we can grow together and then, if we grow to be 300 people plus, we might have an overflow for a while, but do we stay at one service if we love one service and maybe move over to the new building? I don't know. So we can keep one service longer, or then do we go to 2? I don't know. But at this point in time, we'll be a church for 20 years as of January 28th, January 28th. For 20 years. God's going to take care of us. We can try new things. We don't just have to be stuck in the rut. So we'll see what God does with that. But you guys also need to know that the temptation is to be, as a church fluctuates, is to be depressed when the church is smaller. That's not how I see it. And over the years, what the Lord has laid upon my heart, like, I can look on Sunday morning and go, man, how come we're lower today? What do we need to do? Do we need to get Starbucks coffee or, whatever, I don't know. And all that's cheesy stuff, right? But on Sunday mornings, like, for a second, I'll be tempted to think, why aren't there more people here? And then what'll happen is God will lay upon my heart, and I'll just look at people and I go, man, these are quality people. And I go, I can't believe I get to minister to you. I can't believe you call me pastor. What an honor to be here, ministering to you. Like, You can teach me. What am I doing teaching you? And that's how I feel on Sunday morning. So God just floods me with this like, you are so blessed. No whining. Thank you, not cranky. Is what God wants me to be, on those mornings. And then to know that when we moved out here, we were in Southern California, home of the big churches, home of the big Calvary chapels, right? And when we moved out here, my heart, and it's still my heart today, and I think it's more truly my heart. It's not just a statement. It's what I really believe. That my philosophy from the beginning was stated this way: Lord, whoever you bring, that's who we're going to minister to. And the most important person in the body of Christ is that person in front of me. And that is my heart. And so if God brings 10 people, I'm going to minister to them like they're 1,000 people. A little more personally, But I want to, and so that was our philosophy. And it's funny because now, even though it was stated back then and it was right back then, it probably took me 10 or 12 years to actually really believe it, to where I'm like, no, I'm okay with this. And if God allows me to minister to anybody, I'm blessed, And so when I see you guys show up for Wednesday night, I'm blessed. I'm not like, how come there's not more people here? I just want more people because the Old Testament is so cool, right? And for me, it was so important in my walk to be in church on Wednesday night and be with the fellowship of the body and traveling through the Word of God with people I love. And it just becomes more and more family, So anyways, let's go ahead and pray. Dear God, we do thank you for this body. Lord, we thank you for Wednesday nights. We thank you that Lord, you have led us to go through the Old Testament, Lord, and to see, Lord, everything you did to lead up to Jesus coming and us recognizing him. Everything you did in your progressive revelation to the point of Jesus, but also everything you did in teaching us principles of faith. Because faith was faith in the Old Testament, even as it is in the New Testament. And David lived by faith. He made mistakes. He made the same types of mistakes in different circumstances that we make. And he made the same recoveries, the Lord, that we are able to make. And he also ran to the same gracious, loving, merciful God that we run to. Lord, you are the same yesterday, today, and forever, Lord, and you're our God. And Lord, as we see you rescue David, it wasn't because he was a king, it's because he was your child, just like we are. And may it be that we just revel in the fact that we're your children, we're your kids, we're your family, and that you love us. And Lord, in those situations, just a practical lesson for tonight was not responding in like kind to evil, not responding evil for evil. But Lord, being able to step back and ask why someone is hurting so bad that they would seek to hurt us. Lord, that we would be able to show grace because we've received so much, Lord. We love you, we praise you, and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.